So, with the release of Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes, we now have a bunch of Planet of the Apes movies. It is one of the most underrated franchises that we have in Hollywood. This franchise has been kicking throughout multiple timelines, multiple different reboots, different sequels, different time jumps. This is just a crazy series with a lot of movies, and today, I'm going to rank through all of them. So we got all the movies in a tier list here, and I'm going to go through each and every one of them, just give my opinion of them, and rank them out in the way that I think they unfold. Starting with all the original movies, going all the way to Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes, the movie that just came out this weekend. So you guys know how these videos work. Before I get into it, please make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications, do all that kind of stuff. I upload every day, so please stick around for some more. And yeah, let's jump right into this thing. Starting with Planet of the Apes, which came out in 1968, the movie that started it all. Directed by Franklin Schaffner, this film takes place 3,000 years in the future, where these humans who were sent as astronauts into space got sucked into like some weird wormhole or space trance, and they got transported 3,000 years into the future. They crash land on a planet and find that it has been completely taken over by apes. It is ruled by this intelligent species of apes who enslave and treat the humans on this planet like they are trash, like they are pets. And this movie is absolutely incredible. We follow this main character, this dude from humanity, who has this very kind of negative view on humans, that humans are going to fuck shit up, and somewhere out there is a better species. Therefore, this film, through this character and through this study, kind of becomes a very philosophical film. It honestly felt so much deeper in its actual subtext and its storytelling than I expected it to on my first watch. Watching how the apes treat humans and sort of reflecting that on how we treat each other in the real world is very interesting, and this film also kind of just felt like a warning to human behavior and some of the terrible things we do. Now, of course, the actual practical stuff of this movie is extremely well done. I think the actual practical effects of the apes, you know, obviously this is all real. These are humans wearing, you know, ape clothing. I think it was done exceptionally well for the times. It all looks convincing. It is terrifying at times. I remember as a kid watching this movie, I hated it. Freaked me the hell out, but it all works here. I think the characters are convincing, the motivations, the world and its design is just so, it kind of sucks you in, and it's never a world that you really want to live in, not because it's controlled by apes and we would all be prisoners there, but just because it feels sort of dreadful and incomplete, and it feels like something's missing. That's capitalism, baby. Hell yeah. Capitalism, democracy, Helldivers 2, Planet of the Apes. Let's get that crossover going. I'm kidding, but either way, there is just something really dreadful about the world that it makes you want to watch more of it, but also it feels almost kind of like a horror movie at points. It's just terrible to watch. Not in like it's a bad movie, but it's just you feel terrible watching it. But this movie's an absolute classic, and it's obvious to see why this, you know, kind of spun so many sequels and spin-offs, because this is a phenomenal movie. It earns the term of classic. Because of that, we are going to put the first Planet of the Apes movie in the S tier at number 1 so far. And then we have Beneath the Planet of the Apes, the first sequel, and this movie is very, very odd. This is a movie that was clearly made very, very fast after the first movie, and they wanted to really take advantage of the fact that the previous movie was so popular and so big, they wanted to jump on a sequel. This film is directed by Ted Post, and it introduces a new lead, a new astronaut who came kind of through the same sort of space wormhole, space void, whatever, that the previous main character went through, and now he is here back on this planet 3,000 years in the future. And spoiler alert, this planet is Earth. I forgot to mention that in the previous one, but yes, it is revealed that this is Earth. And this movie kind of just follows the same sort of line of events of the first movie. We see this character introduced to this world, learning about the apes and how they control it, learning that it is Earth, learning that the humans are sort of enslaved, and we eventually run into the main character of the first movie as well, and we just kind of get this weird sort of colliding of characters, these extremely similar characters. This movie also delves into more extraordinary ideas on this world. I was kind of fascinated after watching the first film to see how the sequel would follow up, how it would expand the world and the mysteries that the first movie sort of insinuated, and I don't really love how this film did it. So essentially this film kind of introduces this weird cult, this cult of humans that are still kind of smart, they could talk, they could think, and they praise and they pray to this gigantic nuclear weapon. This nuclear weapon that not only can destroy, you know, what nukes can destroy, like cities and areas, it could destroy the entire planet. Remember that scene in Oppenheimer?
We thought we might start a chain reaction that would destroy the entire world?
Yeah, well, it does that shit. It ignites the atmosphere and it kills everybody. And this movie tries to get into more of a metaphorical plot about how humans and apes are just going to destroy each other and how humanity is destructive, and like, it's just going down that metaphorical landslide that the first movie also went down. But for some reason, I was just so much less interested in the world in this one. I just wasn't as into the characters, and I felt as though it became kind of a goofy sort of 70s movie, you know, a movie from that times that felt very much from that times, and I think it still has a lot of the pros of the first movie. I still think the practical effects looks good. I think the characters at times really, really work. I think the energy of it all is there. I just think this one drags on a little bit longer, and I think the introduction of that weird cult group just did not really work for me, and I think the ending of this film is great. It's shocking, it's devastating, but it also made it almost impossible for them to make an actual sequel to this that would work, and I'll talk about that in a second. But the ending of this movie was like a really big swing, and it made it so the next few films were also very, very big swings. But we're gonna put Beneath the Planet of the Apes in C tier. It's not poop, but it's not great. Now we have Escape from Planet of the Apes, and this is a weird movie to talk about because it's very, very different from the previous two and from any of the movies that came after this. Escape from the Planet of the Apes picks up at the end of the second movie. Of course, in the second movie, spoiler alert, they ignite that gigantic atom bomb and they destroy the Earth. Humanity and apes destroy each other, everybody dies, it's very, very sad. So how do you create a sequel? Well, some of the characters from that movie, specifically Cornelius and Zira, they escape on the original spaceship that had crashed in the future, and they go back in time. Yes, they bring time travel into this whole thing, which is something that I personally hate in films. I am not a fan of time travel, but they do it here, and it sends the apes back to present-day America, which in reality was 1971, so not present day. It sends them back to the 70s, and they have to pretty much go through the same experience of the original Planet of the Apes movie, just in reverse. These apes are now experiencing a world in which humanity controls everything, and apes are seen as pets. And we sort of see them kind of adapting to this world, and how humanity adapts to them, and the secrets that they kind of hold on to. This future that they know is coming, but is so far away that it's like, can we really do much to prevent it now? And that sort of becomes the question of these final three movies of, can we prevent something that we don't even know how it gets to that point? Can we try to prevent it? Like, who knows? But that's sort of what this film starts to deal with, and it is more fascinating than the previous film. Not as fascinating as the first film, but it is a big enough leap and a big enough change that this movie was a fun watch, and it became something that I most definitely did not expect when I was watching this series for the first time. I think this film deals with politics in a very interesting way, especially of the times, and this is just such a different movie for a franchise like this. I would almost like to see how they would handle a movie like this today, because it's so ridiculous and it's so outlandish in its concept, that it is also fascinating in its study of how this situation would be handled, how these characters would be handled. But this, to me, is a very, very good movie that does drag behind the first movie of the franchise, but it's definitely much better than the second. So we're going to put Escape from the Planet of the Apes in A tier. It is a really good movie. And then 1 year later, we got Conquest of the Planet of the Apes. This is, of course, a direct sequel to Escape of the Planet of the Apes, the fourth film in the franchise, and I don't love this one. This movie to me had the same problems that Beneath the Planet of the Apes had. The very, very similar problems of it felt rushed. It almost felt like we need to get a sequel made as quick as possible. We need to continue the story, and we need to move everything forward. And for me, because of that, it just sort of felt rushed. Now, this is the first of the Caesar movies in the original series. Caesar, who sort of rises up to be the leader of the apes and sort of free them from captivity and free them from their entrapment of humanity and start the cycle that will eventually lead to the first Planet of the Apes movie. And this movie in concept does work in a sense that you have this world in which apes are enslaved, and Caesar sort of leads a revolution, leads a fight, a conquest against humanity to free the apes. The issue with this movie is that it just feels so undercooked, especially after the previous one. Now, Caesar is an interesting character. He's a complex character that goes through many changes over the course of this movie and the next one. He could be angry, he could be fierce, he's trying to learn about his species, about humanity, the future, everything that's going on, and it becomes a more complex story than it appears on the front, but this film just ends up being kind of boring compared to the previous three. You know, obviously the first movie is your introduction into the Planet of the Apes. It's very, very interesting. It's very unique and fun to learn about this world and the characters. Beneath, a sequel, kind of bland, kind of boring, but then Escape is kind of like this weird, giant new step. And this movie felt like it was too afraid to take another giant, big step, so it just kind of told the obvious story after Escape from the Planet of the Apes. And because of that, this one falls a little bit short for me. We're going to put Conquest guess, right behind Beneath. You know what, we'll put it in front of Beneath. I think it's a little bit better than that one. And then we get Battle for the Planet of the Apes, the final chapter of the original saga of films. This film jumps many, many, many years into the future as we see Caesar, who is leading kind of this weird colony of apes and humans that live together. Although there is clear tensions between humans and apes, we start to see this conflict arise between the two species that will eventually lead to sort of the downfall of everything and the rise of the apes. There's a lot of stuff in this movie that happens that teases the future movies, that teases the stuff that happens 3,000 years in the future with the atomic bomb cults, with a lot of the stuff with the characters. There are ideas and concepts in this movie that I really like. Sort of this a version of Caesar who's trying to advert this future that they know is coming and is trying to lead a better path. It almost felt Dune-like, right? When Paul and Leto Atreides, they see this golden path and they're like, we have to go down this no matter what happens. We cannot lead to the other futures. It sort of feels like that in a way, but the film never is as morally complex or conceptually deep as it could have been. I think if you were to take this concept of this film and give it to a stronger writer or a stronger director in modern times, you could have had a fundamentally great movie, but at the onset it just ends up being kind of a boring final chapter, a boring conclusion to a final couple movies that to me just didn't really work. The whole Caesar saga sort of lost, I think, what made this series, this original saga, so great. I will say I do like the look of this movie, the feel of it. I like how they kind of went back to the costumes of the original movies for the apes, sort of like how it separated itself from modern civilization. This felt like it was clearly taking place in a post-modern civilization world, which I appreciated, which is what I loved about the original film. And I also really like the final scene of this series. I love the ambiguity around it, and I think it is a really beautiful final moment. I think it's arguably the best scene of the whole series, and it does wrap a nice little bow on it. I love it, and spoiler alert yet again, but that scene of just the statue and the tear coming down from his eyes and not knowing if they had, if he's crying, if the statue's crying because they had averted that horrible, horrible future 3,000 years from now, or if he's crying because it seems like we're heading down that path. That is the future we're going towards. It's a beautiful moment that really leaves it up for the audience, and you get two different endings if you think about it. But outside of that ending, I love this movie. We're gonna put Battle for the Planet of the Apes right at the top of C tier. And then we get Tim Burton's Planet of the Apes. My God, how is this movie not a banger? How did this movie not end up being incredible? This movie came out in a time where Hollywood was trying to figure out a way to bring this series back. They had multiple different directors and people come in and write scripts. Oliver Stone had a script that was gonna star Arnold Schwarzenegger. Yeah, that would have been crazy. There were ideas to do the Halloween treatment and do a sequel to the original film that ignored the rest of the films. That's a great idea. Maybe we should go back to that. But lo and behold, we get a Planet of the Apes movie starring Mark Wahlberg that is a reboot, and it is very, very different than any of the films that came before. It is a film that, of course, takes place in a world where Mark Wahlberg is an astronaut who crash lands on this weird, futuristic sort of ape culture, this area that is controlled by apes, but it is very, very different in how it actually plays out its story and the consequences and how it handles its timeline and everything going on with it. There are a lot of things I enjoy about this movie. I love the looks of the apes. I think the practical apes in this movie are really, really great. I also even like Marky Mark. I love Marky Mark and everything he does, and he's no different here. He's great. I love the villain of this movie, General Fade. I mean, he looks like a gnarly, badass motherfucker. He used to scare the shit out of me as a kid. This movie just had a lot going for it, but there's something just so forgettable and boring about this movie. I can't put my finger on it, but it's so different than any other Tim Burton movie. Tim Burton movies, what he's so good at is sucking you into the screen, sucking you into the bizarre world, in worlds that could never exist in our world, like worlds that are just so far from our reality, but feel so comforting and almost warm, even if they are terrible in nature, right? He's so good at doing that with his gothic style, and something about that was missing here, and it's almost hard to believe, because on paper, forget this movie exists, a Tim Burton Planet of the Apes movie? How the fuck is that not the greatest movie ever? Like, that should just work, especially after you watch the original film and see how the best part of that is how it sucks you into its terrible world and makes you want to watch and be there forever. And how did he not do that with this? I don't know. At least for me, it didn't work. The ending of this film, of course, everybody knows by now, it's ridiculous, but it's also kind of incredible. I mean, it's just hilarious, crash landing in DC. You think you're saved, you think Marky Mark has won, he's gotten back home, and then you see the Lincoln Memorials taken over by Fade, and the apes control everything. It's a brilliant ending that never got resolved. It's stupid, but I love it. It kind of echoes the original ending of the first movie, that reveal of like, oh shit, that's what's been going on this whole time, and it doesn't work. But it works. I like it. I enjoy the ending of this movie. But let's rank it. Where are we gonna put this movie? Ah, shoot. I'm tempted to put it in B because I kind of like it more than these movies, but like, objectively speaking, we'll put it at the top of C. How about that? We'll keep B. I feel like we need B open for some other movies. 10 years after Tim Burton's movie, Rupert Wyatt comes in and reboots the franchise with Rise of the Planet of the Apes. Now, the whole pitch of this series, this new series of Apes movies, is it would be sort of an origin and a prequel story to the original film. Except not really, because there's way too many continuity errors for that to be the case. So what it is a reboot that starts off with showing you how the apes could possibly take over. So we have this movie that stars James Franco, this guy who studies apes and does all this stuff with apes and technology and vaccines and whatever. He's trying to cure his dad who has dementia or something like that. It's been a while since I watched the movie. But in his studies with this disease stuff, he figures out a way to make apes smarter. He has this ape, Caesar, who is a genius-level ape. He has the intelligence of humans, pretty much. And we watch Caesar growing up with James Franco, having a home, being happy, being loved, and then a bunch of other stuff happens, and it becomes a very, very interesting study of the apes and how they delve into being as smart as they are, and also the fall and the hubris of humanity. This is a movie that I absolutely loved as a kid, and like even now. I think this is a very, very good movie. It's one of James Franco's best performances, and I know you're not allowed to say his name anymore, right? He's one of those, he who shall not be named, or whatever. Like, I don't give a shit. James Franco was really good in this movie. I think everybody in this film was good. Andy Serkis playing a mo-capped Caesar in probably his second most iconic role of his career is just so great. He's both able to sell the emotional side of this character, who has so much complexity to him, but also the physical angst, the strength of Caesar, the sadness when he feels betrayed, but the love when he feels loved, right? Like, he sells all of these things to perfection. And I think this film accomplishes something that movies like Conquest of the Planet of the Apes try to accomplish, this idea of apes sort of revolting against humanity and freeing themselves. It's very much about the freeing part, and Caesar freeing himself, but also still finding a way to connect with humanity, and it is a really beautiful movie in that way. This movie does drag at times. I don't think the third act completely works. It does exist a little bit outside of logic with some things, but at the same time, this is a very heartwarming movie that I ought to find myself going back to and rewatching. I just really enjoy it. I think it's a beautiful start to this trilogy. For those reasons, I'm putting Rise of the Planet of the Apes in A tier. We're gonna put it at the front of A tier. And a few years later, we got the brilliant movie Dawn of the Planet of the Apes, directed by Matt Reeves, who is now a superstar in Hollywood. Dawn of the Planet of the Apes picks up Caesar's story 10 years after the end of the last one, where this flu, this virus, has absolutely ramsacked humanity. Most of humanity has died off, and we now live in a post-apocalyptic world in which humans are barely surviving, but these apes are very smart and they're living in their nice little community together. And this movie is a very simple story. You have this community of humans who are trying to put on this generator, they're trying to restore power to their community, and they sort of come into conflict with the apes. Now, Caesar and some of the members of these human groups are trying to find a peaceful resolution. They want to work together, they want everybody to be happy, and they want things to be great, and everybody to be free and good. But of course, on both sides, you get some bad eggs. You get Koba on the apes, who hates humans. He has resentment for humans, so he's plotting to do some bad stuff. And you also have Gary Oldman, who just seems to be a dick in his own right, and he wants to kill off the apes. And because of this, conflict sort of arises outside of the view of our main characters who are trying to avoid conflict, and it becomes such a great movie. This is a phenomenal, phenomenal movie, a damn near masterpiece. It's a movie that studies the relationship between these two species in a very complex way, a way that shows this want to work together, this want for kindness and morality, but in how fast those things can be broken down for very, very stupid reasons. We live in this world in this movie that is so fascinating. It's nowhere near the worlds that we saw at the beginning of the original series. It's nowhere near the world of something like Battle for the Planet of the Apes. It's a destroyed world that still holds beauty in it. It holds beauty in it because of the characters that live in it and the beauty that they make of it. And it's such an interesting world to watch and explore and expand. And Matt Reeves does a great job in this movie of taking his time. This is a slow burn. He relaxes his way through this film, slowly engaging the audience with the plot and everything that's going on, and it works extremely, extremely well, where it builds up to that third act that becomes this action-packed sort of finale that works really well. It's action that is earned. It's not just thrown together because we need a big action set piece. It absolutely works. Now, Andy Serkis is brilliant in this movie, again, with his Caesar performance. I think this might actually be his best work, maybe of his entire career in this movie. I also really like Jason Clarke's performance in here as the human character. A lot of the human character characters in this series are just kind of like throwaways. They appear for one movie, then they disappear. He is probably the standout of all of these movies. I think he's awesome here. This movie altogether is just absolutely brilliant, and in my opinion, I think it's probably the best Planet of the Apes movie. So there should be no surprise, we're putting Dawn of the Planet of the Apes in the top of S tier. And then we get Matt Reeves' final Planet of the Apes movie, the finale of this new trilogy of Caesar. It is called War for the Planet of the Apes. A movie that takes place a little bit after the end of Dawn of the Planet of the Apes, where humanity has started this war against the remaining apes. They have declared war because of the end of Dawn of the Planet of the Apes, and we now have a fractured human society, this army of humans that are just a bunch of dicks fighting against the apes who just want to survive. And this movie throws in a lot of different twists and turns. You have apes that were not a part of Caesar's original group now getting smarter. We're starting to see the natural evolution of that species, and we're seeing the de-evolution of humanity because the flu has evolved, and we now see humanity is losing their ability to talk. They're losing their ability to think, and you see these seeds being planted that are going to lead to that eventual 2,000-year time jump where humans are completely devolved. This movie, I am not as high on this movie as everybody else. I like this movie a lot. This movie has a lot of great stuff in it. You have yet again another great Andy Serkis performance. You get a very tight-knit group of apes that you can connect with just about all of them. You get all of the moral questions you have apes working for the humans and fighting each other. You have the moral questions of why humanity's doing what they're doing, this fight for survival, just to live on this planet. The moral questions in this movie work. You get Woody Harrelson, who plays this mysterious colonel villain, and he's so great in this role, as he is in everything he does. My problem with this movie is, whereas the slow burn nature of Dawn of the Planet of the Apes really works, I actually don't think it works as well in this movie. I think the slow burn nature of this film kind of hurt this film. Because of Dawn, we took so much time to get to know the characters in the world and what's going on. This film does that again. It takes just as much time to slowly take you through this world, slowly walking you through what's going on and the state of everything. Whereas the movie's called War for the Planet of the Apes. Going into this movie, you're kind of thinking, I want to see how the apes and human conflict elevates to a point to where we can get to those original Planet of the Apes movies, even if it's a new timeline version of that. And although you do get some of those answers, you get some of that, in turn, what this movie actually is sort of this slow character study of Caesar, and it works. It works really well, and it worked a lot for a lot of people, but for me, I think I just kind of wanted something a little bit more from this film that has always left me not wanting to revisit this one. I just felt kind of empty watching this, and I didn't get as much out of it as the previous film. So it's saying that we're going to put War for the Planet of the Apes in B tier. It will hold that tier all to itself. And that brings us to the newest film, Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes, directed by Wes Ball, the same guy that made the Maze Runner films, and this is a movie that I had very interesting expectations for. I like Wes Ball as a director. The guy oozes, enthusiasm. He oozes passion for this industry, which always makes me excited to see what people like him will do. But then yet again, this is the first Planet of the Apes movie produced by Disney, the studio that kills every franchise it touches. So I was very nervous. Luckily, this movie kicks ass. Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes is the start of a brand new trilogy. It is a sequel to War for the Planet of the Apes in the same universe, but it takes place about 300 years after that movie, where we follow this character of Noah, who lives in this world in which apes kind of live in their own communities, their own world. They are the commanding force of this world. Humans have sort of resorted back to that tribalistic nature that they were in the original Planet of the Apes movie. We kind of got that version of the world, almost. And it's a very simple story of Noah and his family getting kidnapped by this kingdom of apes, and he now has to go and save them. And along the way, we meet a lot of interesting characters, like Freya Allen's character, who is this human who is smarter than every other human, and we have a very interesting sort of adventure in this film. This film, like the previous two movies, is a slow burn. It takes its time to reintroduce you to the world and what's going on. Now, the reason it works more here than it does in War is because we have not seen this world in 300 years. Well, not literally, but figuratively, we have not seen what has happened in this world in the 300 years that have transpired. We don't know how the humans have been. We don't know how the apes have gotten to this point. We do not know how the history is being interpreted. The history of Caesar, the history of his teachings, his lessons, his times, and now we are seeing how the interpretations of that have affected different communities of apes. It's a very smart way in to telling a story in the future of this world. But this movie at its core is a visual spectacle, as are the previous films, but this one more so than that. This film is definitely taking a note from the newest Avatar movie, The Way of Water, of being this CGI visual treat. The large-scale shots of this world that has been completely torn apart by nature and by time. Cities under moss, under, nature. Baseball stadiums destroyed destroyed, bridges torn in half. It is an absolutely stunning movie to look at just visually. The CGI of the Apes is the best that it's ever been in the entire series. Even without Andy Serkis performing in this movie, they are still able to bring great performances to these characters that are entirely mocapped. The characters here are really, really well written. I think every single one of them is great and easy to follow and has motivations that I enjoy. I think the film has a very strong antagonist that makes it pretty clear by the end of the movie that there is no real antagonist in this movie, that it's just sort of that classic plot, that idealistic nature of these two species that want to survive, and for some reason they feel as though their survival depends on being dominant over the other species. There's no reality to some of these people, to some of these characters, in which both species can work together, and that's the idea of like how they interpret Caesar's words. Caesar, who wanted to work together with the two species, but because of that, we have these two conflicting sides in this film, and we also have Noah, who's just trying to save his family, a very easy thing to grasp onto as an audience member. This is a movie that I really love, and even a couple days after seeing it, it's really grown on me even more than after that first viewing. I think this film is really well made, and it is such an interesting way into doing this new trilogy. Now, where that trilogy is going to go and where the ending of this movie kind of teases, I'm not 100% sold on, because I think it's almost a cop-out. They set up this world and how it looks 300 years into the future, and it's very interesting, and I like the direction that the world is going in, but they kind of cop out at the end and say, well, actually, there are a bunch of, and I don't want to spoil it, but And I don't know how I feel about that yet. I have to wait for the sequels, and who knows when that movie's going to come out. Who knows who's going to direct it, because Wes Ball is off doing Legend of Zelda. But I'm intrigued, and I think this was the best possible way to continue this story in this world without directly continuing it, because I don't know if a Cornelius movie, a direct sequel to War for the Planet of the Apes following his kids, would have been as interesting as jumping into the future. Not the far future, but the almost 300, 400-year future. An option would have been to jump 2,000 years and do a remake of the original film. That could have been cool, but I think sort of seeing this middle area, right? After the start of the Planet of the Apes, but before that section, the original movies, I think this is a very interesting period of time to play around with that they haven't done yet in any Planet of the Apes films, and this movie absolutely worked for me. And because of that, I'm actually going to put Kingdom in S tier. We're going to put it right at the end, though. So that's it. That's my list. If you look at it now, really good series. There's no poop. I can confirm there are no poop Planet of the Apes movies. 3 S tier movies, that's pretty good. A couple A tiers, Really great series. This is one of the best franchises Hollywood has, and I hope that it continues, because it seems to be that the one of the few classic summer blockbuster movies that we still get. With stuff like Star Wars and Marvel sort of flustering, this is a franchise we could really hold on to. That's it, guys. What do you guys think of this video? What do you guys think of my rankings? Let me know down below. Make sure to like this video, subscribe for more, make sure to turn on notifications, see everything when I post it. See you guys in the next video.